think I have a selectmen's report at the moment, specific to the budget.
Or could be on anything.
The summer gathering was well attended, and we were very happy with how it went. And that's about all I can think of to say at the moment.
Okay.
It's summertime.
It's summertime. Yeah.
Any questions that the budget committee might have? To BB? Okay. One off the list. Number 2, discuss fiscal year 2025 budget preparation process. So in years past, for those that have been doing this a while, and for those that are new, we would meet with the department heads as well as the selectmen as department heads reviewed their budgets. This year, however, there's a change to the process, which I was just informed of, which will be that the selectmen will be meeting with department heads on October 27th, which is a Friday, for the majority of the day to review the budget. So last year, I think we had 4 or 5 meetings. I can't remember off the top of my head the exact amount, along with the selectmen. The selectmen then came back. We were actually talking about budgets before they were, before we got the selectmen's budget. And then we met again, had some similar but also different questions for budget heads, and then we did our voting. So it can be an open discussion on what we think we want to do. Just top of my mind, the thought would be this year we could potentially do what we've done in the past prior to meeting with the selectmen, which is allow the selectmen to meet with department heads, come to us with their proposed budget, and then we have discussions with department heads post that. So we have the selectmen budget in front of us. Still gives us a ton of time, if that's October 27th, to meet and then go into the new year and to have discussions around final budgets and voting. So we could, after that meeting with the selectmen on the 27th, Kim, you mentioned like maybe in the next couple weeks, we would have the selectmen's budget. So
After the 27th.
after the 27th. So mid-November to the end of the year, we could have those discussions with department heads, ask questions like we've done in the past, and then go into the new year and have other discussions and voting. But I'll leave that up. I'd love to hear back from other budget committee members on a process that you think would work best.
I'm a fan of continuity, so whatever we did last year,
Well, the difference between last year was that we met before the selectmen had their discussions. We were doing it at the same time,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
And they didn't have their final budget, right? So we actually got their final budget later. Some things had changed. We had to rediscuss some things, if that's that's how you'd say it. So the difference would be kind of what we've done, John. I mean, probably 5 or 6 years ago, which was we got the selectmen's budget, then had our discussions with the.
I happen to like that proposal, and we got some real objectives to go after. Then we got something in front of us that we can really talk about. And I think that's a good way of doing it.
Okay. Colin, what about you?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do we want to look at dates? Would that be helpful now to plan ahead on calendars? Typically we've met on Wednesdays at 6:30. I can't. I know work happens and life happens. So obviously those aren't mandatory meetings to make. In the past, we've all missed some of those, but especially as we get to voting is when we really want folks to attend. So do you recall, Kim, how many times did we meet last year to have those what makes the most sense as far as number of departments to discuss per meeting? Right? Typically, Chief, your department was yours, and it was with dispatch, right? That was one meeting.
Yeah, I think generally we did like a public safety. So it was police, fire, communications, and emergency management was one group. Public Works is often its own group, and sometimes it used to go over sometimes even a second meeting. And when that happens, we would have other groups kind of fill in. We usually have library, recreation together. There's usually a night for nonprofits, which are the protective associations, COA, those kinds of things. It's its own night. Administration would be a night. So there was, and I want to say 5 or 6 meetings. And then you'd have a last meeting because sometimes you'd either have additional information or want to call somebody back in.
Okay.
We used to way back when budget committee would get the selectmen's budget early December. Now, if the selectmen hear the budget's on the 27th, you might get it between November 8th or the 15th, depending on if they have to call people back or what changes they need. So you could potentially have the budget earlier than you used to when you did it the way you're doing it now.
Mhm.
And obviously with the selectmen's meeting, it'll be an all-day meeting, we think. It's a public meeting, anybody can go. So budget members could go to sort of get a jump on some of the information or some of the discussions the selectmen are having.
So would it be worth finding 6 dates? And obviously, if we needed to add on or if we needed to reduce by 1, we could do that. But at least for now, tentatively set six Wednesdays aside. Does that make sense? I mean, sounds good. Okay. So let's see. Maybe we should start with absolute no dates, which would be obviously Thanksgiving timeframe, but any other, I know right now I can't do this date because, and we can go from there. Any Wednesdays in November, December? Yeah, I mean, if Wednesdays are the best dates, I mean, maybe Tuesdays are the best dates, maybe Thursdays. I know it's hard with 9 people to get exact dates, but be
You
curious.
could probably start like November 29th if you're gonna start in November. I would think the selectmen's budget would be, because I'm assuming you want to miss the 22nd
Right, would
Thanksgiving
be
week.
Thanksgiving, right? And you think the 15th is too early?
Well, you could start with the 15th. I think that would be potential that the selectmen could be all done and the budgets could be copied and ready to go. So you could start the 15th,
Put pressure on Lynn?
put pressure on Lynch like she needs any more than she has, but sure.
What do you?
So we're shooting for the public hearing the second Wednesday, so like the 14th, Valentine's. Is that a problem
Ugh.
for anybody? Fine with me.
What?
You'll have to bring candy, but
Where's the romance in this room? My God. Huh. Jeez.
it didn't say that candy and flowers would not be allowed.
Oh,
I'm saying. Yeah, right.
oh, jeez.
So we could shoot for the,
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, yeah, I'm okay on the 29th as well, if that's agreeable to everyone. Charlie, how about you? Okay, so why don't we start on the 29th and go through the 20th, perhaps? Those 4 Wednesdays, and then we can pick it back up in the new year.
mhm. Like the 10th or,
Probably I would say the 10th. I mean, a lot of people travel on New Year's, so the 10th and the 17th, that would be 6 weeks. And again, the 17th, we may meet, we may not need to meet,
that's a question.
dependent upon what we can get through. How does that sound? Again, and we know things are gonna happen. But so we would start the 29th.
November
I
29th.
am the newest married person.
That's
in the
right.
room. Huh.
So the 9th, the 6th, the 13th. I mean, how does everybody feel about the 20th? It's close to
Oh, okay.
Christmas, but. Okay, so the 20th, the 10th and the 17th.
Right,
Those
so
are-
then you take the 27th and the 3rd off.
Yeah.
Yep. 10th and 17th,
Mental holidays,
right? And then you have the 24th, 31st as potentials if you need them,
if we need them.
and even really the 7th.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, I guess the only thing we would add, BB, maybe it's worth asking the other selectmen if that works for them, but sounds like it should. Okay. We'll let the department heads fight over the order of
Well, I can't
dates
have
to-
fighting. I usually just assign them and hope that there's no
No.
infighting about who gets the
Rock,
good
paper,
date.
scissors, something like
Right.
that, make it fun. Best bribes win. That's right. That's right. All right, great. Well, again, if you have any questions on that or if something comes up, let me know, but we'll start tentatively set those dates. All right, let's move into the meat of the agenda, which would be capital reserve funds and discussion. So again, in June, we had a discussion with the selectmen on thoughts around, there've been lots of questions in recent years on Capital reserves, you have a few sheets in front of you. You have the capital reserve funds through fiscal year 2020. Fiscal year 2019 on your desk. You also have the list of the town created capital reserve funds, the year it was established, the account name, the purpose, and if the selectmen are agents to expend, correct? And then the Schedule A worksheet that we discussed on June 7th, which talks about the capital reserves and expendable trust funds, how they're funded, and guidelines, as well as the questions that we actually began to discuss on June 7th. So let me stop there and answer any questions there might be just on the content that we have in front of us before we go into the questions themselves. Yes, sir. Can you, sorry, we're gonna do, because it's being recorded.
On that last column, agents to expend, you said selectmen. Does that mean they've approved the use of that, or no, they haven't, or yes, they have, or what does that
Yeah.
mean?
It means that the selectmen are able to spend the money in the capital reserve fund for purposes stated in the fund without a vote of town meeting. So town meeting appoints them as agents to expend so that they can expend the funds all of the 12 months of the year outside of town meeting.
And why doesn't it say selectmen to expend?
Because the legal term in the RSA is agents to expend.
Okay, so if it's a yes, that means they had voted yes to
The
expend that money?
No,
No.
town meeting has authorized them to spend it if the need arises during the year.
Okay,
So a simple way to think about it, if it's no, it potentially would have to go to town meeting to vote, right? So things that we might want to happen would actually have to wait for town meeting to have the town vote if we wanted to expend money in those funds.
so for example, if the fire department, sorry, Will, the fire department radio and breathing apparatus, that has not been expended.
The selectmen are not appointed agents to expend, so if the selectmen and the chief wanted to buy radios, it would go on the warrant at town meeting and the voters would be asked, can we spend X amount of dollars to buy fire department radios?
Right,
That would be the only way to spend that money.
and there's a certain amount of reserves in each of these listed accounts?
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, I'll look to the budget committee members for how you want to do this. We could go question by question. We could open it up to just general thoughts. I'd be curious how you guys want to approach this. Melissa.
I would like to go through the capital reserve funds line by line and address whatever comes up for the questions.
Okay. Any other? So, sorry, you want to go through each one of the funds on this spreadsheet
Yeah, just to see,
to see
okay,
the amounts?
starting with the first one, are there any questions, any comments on that first line?
Any comments on like, do you want to talk also about the amount of money that's in the reserves? Okay. Any other thoughts? Or suggestions?
Yeah, I have, I'm just wondering, are we expecting to answer all these questions tonight and move on with this? Or is this an idea where maybe we would take a few of our members and informally have a subcommittee? I wouldn't call it a subcommittee because then you could talk about quorums, but just, you know, a few of them, and they could talk over some of these things and then come back and present it to this group. I have a feeling that we're going to get into a sort of a quagmire here tonight by talking about all various aspects of this, but that's just a suggestion.
Sure. Open to other suggestions as well. Was that what you were going to say?
No, we should just leave time for perhaps other questions, but maybe we can address that as we go through, as Melissa said, one by one.
Any other thoughts or suggestions? So John, just to go back to yours, so your suggestion is to have folks meet select folks on this subcommittee meet? A representative of the committee meet and talk about these? Sorry, can you
Well,
just
yeah,
restate?
yeah, I'd like to see maybe a smaller group do it. I have a feeling that that they could be more prepared to delve more deeply into things and then come back and present it to the overall committee. And then it gives us something to talk about and work from, I think, but
Chris, from the last meeting, I had made a few notes and that I thought might be helpful next steps. And one was, and this goes to you, Kim, is agency status debatable? Can that be changed at any time, but through approval of the town? Is that
Correct. Yep.
correct?
Yep.
Okay, so one might be to look at funds that don't have the select board as agents to determine whether it would make sense to create that status and provide rationale for it, or not. The other was fund consolidation. We had talked about the potential idea of consolidating some of the funds that might then allow for purpose use that would be more flexible for the selectmen. Third was whether or not we thought the total amount of the fund might be tied as a percentage to some number. Is it, should we as a town have X as a percentage in capital reserve funds based upon a budget of Y? Because there was no methodology. I think when we talked, there's no formula methodology for determining adequacy. It's more an individual fund based on future anticipated expense. The other was purpose language, to determine whether the purpose language really effectively clearly and effectively describes purpose to those who are the agents, as well as to the taxpayer. And then the possibility of new funds that are not presently represented here. So if my thought is in context with what John was suggesting, that while we could take time tonight and go through greater detail, answer questions, task a group to come back with a set of recommendations if those to those items.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly open. I'd have to look to Cam.
If
around
there's
the-
value to do.
Yeah,
that,
I'd have
I
to
don't
look
know
to
if
Cam
there
around
is.
the legality of a subcommittee if it is a subcommittee, it must be a subcommittee vote around certain members of budget committee meeting and coming back to present
They should,
without all budget committee members. So,
yep, it would be subject to the right to know law as far as posting and minutes, but that's not a problem. Even if you don't call it a subcommittee, you can call it whatever we want, but if it's a group of budget committee members working to present something to the budget committee, that would be, our meetings with department heads, that's for your own information. That's not something about, presenting or doing research and presenting it to a board. But if you have 2 or 3 of you that are tasked with looking at these, and I don't think that's a problem, though. We have meeting space and we just need 24 hours to post it and,
yeah, and I would say the purpose is to inform, not to make a decision, right? It's more information than it is, this is what we're doing as a budget committee.
well, and I think also to come back maybe with some proposals, but the proposals that can be added to or talked about or refused, but at least we got some real ideas to present out there, and it just seems like it might be more efficient in the long run than. Of course,
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think
Yeah.
these questions are very broad and we could sit here for hours and hours and debate and have our own opinions. So I'm open to that if people are willing to, if there are a number of people willing to sit down and discuss these and come back to present with the understanding, obviously, that we're not going to, my own thought is that we're not all going to agree on those recommendations. So when it comes to then
Sure.
discussion in budgets for certain capital reserves, right, we're still going to have the same opinions.
Yeah, but we're gonna have something to have an opinion about.
Yeah, sure.
So
Absolutely.
I
No,
I think that's the
completely
big-
agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Melissa, I do think it's worthwhile to go through the lines to understand better what each of the capital, I know some folks weren't here last time too, so maybe it's to go through each line item. I don't know how much gory detail we go through each one, but at least discuss each one and what is it for? And the amount in there. It also gives the department heads who are here an opportunity to say, it's not enough, it's too much, it's just right, something like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you're agreeable with that, okay. So do we want to handle the subcommittee, quote unquote, and who would want to be a part of that? I'm
Well-
assuming since you suggested it, you'd like to be a part of that.
Oh, I'd love to. Just as long as it's not on February 14th, just. Sure.
I do also want to be cognizant of folks who are working full time.
Sure.
Of the amount of time that we meet on that, right? I think the majority of members here work during the week. So, just how much time do we want to put into that?
Well, that might be the benefit of a small committee. I mean, I hope it doesn't seem biased, but there's a few of us that
I would say that
gave
that
up
is-
work a little while ago, and we probably could.
Yeah, but I would also think that that is a little biased because that
Sure,
doesn't
okay.
provide an opportunity for other folks who may be interested, even though they work, to meet and discuss.
Or they can come.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I guess I'd look to budget committee members. And again, I think we need to present this to Lou and Lindsay, even though they're not here, to get their thoughts if they'd like to participate. I'm going to assume that you are raising your hand to participate.
Yeah.
I'm happy to join if it's
Charlie,
helpful.
Good.
anyone else? He gave me a thumbs to you, so
Sure, I'll join.
I'll join a group.
I was gonna say, like, by the end of the time, then we have, half the budget committee.
I mean, at the end of the day, you'll have a set of proposals that can be voted on and
Yeah, sure.
there's something more hard and fast in there, right?
Yeah. I guess and I want to make sure we're all clear on the outcomes, potential outcomes, right? These are recommendations, and Kim, keep me honest. These recommendations would go back to the selectmen for them to consider, right? And whether they consider them or not. And then obviously, as we have discussions around budget, even folks that aren't participating in the committee still might have stronger opinions on those answers, are still allowed to vote their own choice on capital reserves, right? So to your point, it's a recommendation and a strong recommendation given the amount of time put into it. But I want to make sure that we're not saying this committee speaks for every budget committee member. Will, you have your hand up.
When you do that, can we video those meetings as well so that the whole budget process is available to folks?
I'm certainly open to that.
I mean, at the end of the day, Kim, keep me honest. I think that all this has got to go in front of the town. I mean, if you're going to change the reserves,
Yeah.
it's all going to be presented to the town. So all that conversation is going to just roll around for a while.
Sure.
So,
Thanks for recommendation, John. So right now we have Charlie, John. Well, let's make sure we have the right members. We have Melissa, Charlie, John, and Colin. Or the you guys can meet on the 14th if you'd like. Although we'll be through most of our budget by then, right? So I don't know how value added that would be for this year. And then I'll ask Lindsay and Lou if one of them would like to attend versus both. They can decide. That would be 4 members. Well, actually 5 of the 9. So that would be a majority. Okay. So Melissa, I'll defer back to you. since it was your suggestion, would you like to start with bridge maintenance fund and just ask questions around the fund itself? I guess what was your suggestion of? going
Well,
through those
like
lines?
bridge maintenance, I see that we started with 122 thousand, and there really hasn't been any payments. We're ending with 124,000. So this is just basically a no-brainer for me. It's a floating fund. And so my question is, does anybody else have anything to discuss on this or any information that they want to know? You know, I would kind of skip over that one myself.
I guess again, I'll make a suggestion that maybe for each of the funds, if we're going to cover them, to give department heads an opportunity who at least have money in those funds or request money for those funds to maybe give a brief description of that in their own words. That makes sense.
Yep.
So Bob, would that be you for bridge maintenance?
Say that again.
Would
talking bridge.
you explain the bridge maintenance fund?
And before Bob gets started, I will remind everyone that the last couple of bridge repairs we did, we bonded the amount, we took out loans. And so that's why some of the money may seem higher than it was. We did Pingree and Otter Pond bridges, and we took loans out for those because there wasn't enough money in the capital reserve. So generally, taking money out for loans is kind of a new thing in the last 4 or 5 years. We hadn't been doing repairs to buildings via loans. So and I'll let Bob explain other kind of bridges that we use this money for.
It could be used for actually resurfacing the deck, stripping it down, putting a new membrane underneath the asphalt, guardrail, maybe spalding underneath the on the cement. We do have the bridges inspected by the state, and you never know what they're going to find. So I guess the list could go on.
Right, our red listed bridges now are all cleared up, right?
Say that again.
Brookside Drive, where our red listed bridges have all been,
Yeah,
fixed.
Brookside's all set. Let's see, we added Pingree, which actually was a culvert, but they considered it a
Right.
bridge. Goose Hole Bridge. And I think there was 2 sets of actually Brookside that
Right.
were done. One before I took over, and then the other one I took care of at the beginning.
So understanding that bridge repair is expensive, although you've mentioned some things that might be less expensive, are there any ideas or needs in the near future off the top of your head that you would use that money for? Because again, to Melissa's point, it's been sitting there, but obviously, you know, we may need to have something, but not sure what the thought is in the future of how that would be spent if we needed to spend it.
Yeah, down the road, I know the bridge down at the end of it's at Lakeshore and Pleasant Street. Probably at some point, the state will probably look at that and say we got to do something to that, but it's okay at this time. I don't think we have anything that's red listed at this point.
And what was again, and please just jump in and ask questions. What do bridge repairs traditionally cost? Like I mean, I know it's hard to say based on the size of the bridge, but if you looked at that bridge, right? If that's the nearest
between
one.
200,000 and 300,000 probably.
Okay.
That's the old price.
Right.
Prices have changed. So.
And would the thought be to add money to this capital? Is your hope to add money to this capital reserve or keep it where it is?
I think it would if there's any kind of an emergency that arises. You know, I mean, a bridge could wash out.
Yeah.
With the rains that we have nowadays.
But
So
we
I
haven't
think
been
it's-
adding funds to it.
Excuse me?
We haven't been adding funds over the years. to
No.
do it.
Well, I couldn't put a number on what we've done. Like Kim said, we bonded the last, I think it was 3, correct? I mean, if it is something that probably we should look at down the road, there are I'd have to get a good inventory on what the bridges actually look like, where we are with them. You know, as far as what might be coming up down the road, but as far as something right now, anything immediate, they're all doing pretty good at this point.
Melissa, you had a question?
We would have to bond it out again because 124,000 isn't gonna be near enough to get done what he would need to get done if the whole bridge was to. So then we're still got money sitting here. I mean, if we bond something out, we bond the whole thing out or just, all right, we don't need 124,500. I would think we'd bond the whole thing out. Let me say that again.
No, I think that was my question to Bob was around, you know, the potential costs and do we want to begin to add money to the fund to pay for that? Or to your point, can we pay? So to Melissa's question, if it's a $250,000 repair and we only have 124,000, could we expend the 124,000 and bond out the other?
Yep, you can have as many financing sources as you're creative enough to find.
Okay.
So if you don't want to bond, and when we have taken out bonds, we've put other things with it. You know, I think the last bond we had 2 or 3 things in it, you know, different projects. So certainly the town could say we'll use $50,000 from a capital reserve, 200,000 from a loan, and maybe money from a grant. There was grant.
Bob, similar to facilities, do we have a maintenance plan for bridges or do we wait for something to break or for us to get a red status on it?
I'm sorry, I couldn't, do we have a plan?
So in facilities, sometimes we do annual maintenance on facilities. Or we do maintenance every so many years on the roof or the building or the side or whatever. For bridges, do we have a maintenance plan or do we wait for something to break or to get a red code?
Generally, our maintenance plan is just what we inspect if we notice something. I guess part of the maintenance would be overlaying the asphalt over the top. If there's any water getting down through the membranes, then it would require stripping the deck. Occasionally I had Mike Hansen come and look at one earlier in the spring, just to give me some ideas as to whether it was going to be a huge expense or not.
So putting aside environmental catastrophes or weather catastrophes, what would it take for you to sit down and think about all the bridges we have and what you would consider to be an end state budget for annual maintenance? And if that became the target, then we could figure out what we need in this number.
I think as far as looking at all the bridges, I'd feel more comfortable with an engineer actually making that decision. As far as, you know, they're more structural, they'd know a lot more than I probably would.
Okay.
As far as that goes, and to put a number on it, that would actually be more productive, I think.
So short of having an engineer look at all of our, and we don't have engineers on staff that can do that, that would have to be someone we would hire. So short of that, we don't know what it would cost us annually to maintain the bridges we have, and we can't anticipate what the failures are. So we really don't have insight into what this number should be.
I was going to suggest that we look at the last, you said we've just done repairs on 2 to 3 bridges recently. So and that we bonded money. So I was going to suggest looking at what those bond amounts were for those bridges. And you were saying somewhere around $250,000 to $300,000 and using that number to set a target. And I know we've talked about setting targets for these funds. And once you hit the target, you don't put any more in. So that was kind of my thought process on that, Colin, was looking at what's been done in the past, setting that target and then setting up a schedule of putting a little bit more money into this account so that it's there if we got hit by a hurricane and a bridge, which could happen. So just my suggestion.
John, go ahead.
Yeah, what are we getting for rates on the bond market now? Some of these things we talked about are back before interest rates really started to climb, and it made sense to take the loans then.
Well, if you go out to like a local bank, the rates that I recently got for Whipple were around 6%.
Yeah,
But the bond bank on their most recent offering, it came in at like 3.75.
3.75.
So
Okay,
that's why we actually delayed going out for the Whipple bond, and I'm
Yeah.
going to be going to the bond bank for that.
my feeling is we ought to keep this money in there. And usually if a bridge around here gets red, what's it, red line, red listed, whatever it is, that we have a few years to respond to it like we did down at but yeah, Brookside, yeah, thanks. And I think we had probably 5 or 6 years before we finally completed that. But then we'd have this here and then we could start adding to this. My understanding right now is interest rates are considered normal by a lot of people, and I don't see that they're going to be dropping. So it gives us some flexibility this way. But
Any other questions about bridging? And I guess I'll just note that if we continue at this pace for all fund names, we'll be here till 9:30, which I don't think we want to do. So maybe I would, maybe if there are any questions about any funds that people definitely want to ask, we could ask those versus going through each one.
I have a general question that might, agents to expend, I wonder why we just don't make them all agents to expend. I mean, why not give the select board the authority to spend something when there's a need? I mean, when I look at, for example, general cemetery maintenance, I don't know what that means, but if there's a need to spend money on cemetery maintenance, we shouldn't have to go to the town meeting to ask for those funds. All right, the funds are there for a reason, and if something happens that requires maintenance, let the select board take care of it. Conservation Commission, DPW building, if something happens to the building, I don't know why we'd want to wait for a town meeting to get authority to spend money to fix the building. I just give it to them. So as I go through it, I don't know why we would not just give agents to expend. There might be 1 or 2 exceptions, but my bias is give it to them all, and just, so maybe we can clear up that column with that conversation around that.
That's up to the voters. I mean, I think some towns voters are reluctant to give their selectmen that authority. In New London, I have not seen that reluctance. When we do ask for new capital reserve funds, we automatically ask to be agents to expend. So if you can get your fellow voters to agree to allow the selectmen, I don't.
So
think
my
it's a
only
problem.
input is that if other budget committee members agreed, one of our proposals to the select board would be to raise articles on the warrant that open up agents to expend for these funds. And again, I mean, yeah, transfer station improvements. God knows that place could use improvements, and we have to go to the town now to spend that money to fix that place. I mean, and
Right, well,
I'm
the
sure
idea
that, I'm
is-
sure these and there's a description as to what improvements mean, but
You're looking at what town meeting said about these funds. That's what town meeting said. And before agents to expend were even a possibility, towns would make plans for something over time, some months, and get to town meeting and say, okay, town meeting, this is what we want to do. So things like a building, God forbid, burning down or whatever, obviously there's insurance for those things. So that's not a capital reserve issue. So the bigger ticket items or a fire truck, you know that you're going to buy a fire truck in a certain year. It's not really a problem to wait to town meeting, generally. But certainly there are things, especially communications and bridge maintenance, things that you want to have the money available if you can. Again, if voters,
Right.
have the trust in their selectmen that they'll use the money wisely, then
Yeah.
agents to
'Cause-
expend are a possibility.
And I see what you're saying. I could also, and not that I don't disagree on the
that's fine.
transfer
Yeah,
station, but as a devil's advocate, if you said, well, if we allowed the selectmen to vote on transfer station improvements, that's going to be a $4 million improvement. Do we want to give the selectmen the ability to fund capital reserves to that amount and then expend that without a town vote, right? So there's some things where I could see the town saying, we'd rather have a say-so in a very high item like that versus, and Chief Lyon, I'll just use you as an example, like we need to replace trucks. We know the trucks cost this amount. Every year we're going to spend this amount of money. It's pretty repetitive. We know that ahead of time versus, hey, today we're going to spend $3 million on it without a town vote for it. if that makes sense. So I'm not saying I agree. I don't agree with you about transfer station, but I can definitely see why there is some no's for some of these.
No, I appreciate that. And so I think the other part of the conversation was the purposefulness of the language. So improvements to transfer station and recycling center. I don't know what that means. Improvement could be capital improvements. I'm going to add a building to it. Improvements could be maintenance. So do we want to be more explicit in front of the town as to what that is? And one of my views is take a look and put all building maintenance into one category and give the selectmen some flexibility and be clear that it's maintenance as opposed to capital improvements that are expanding the building or what have you. And if you have clarity around the reserve being for maintenance and all buildings are grouped together, then it gives us, and you give the select board the ability to expend those funds. You can give them the authority to keep buildings maintained without having to go to the town for those requirements. Just a thought.
I think, and I want to, again, don't disagree. I think from what I recall on June 7th, we definitely have to be careful with language, because if it's just maintenance, then if something happens that might fall outside of that, but that fund would have taken care of that. Now you can't use it because it's not considered maintenance. So do you then add more funds because it's not considered maintenance? So it's a slippery slope. I can see that. Melissa,
Yeah, I was gonna say maintenance should be part of the everyday operating expenses. It should be like computer replacement. But you should always maintain your computers. It needs it, you do it.
Mhm.
So computer maintenance is expendable here, but why is it a capital reserve?
I think that's probably because some years ago, 15, 20, we'd buy a server, it would be $20,000, which was, 20 years ago, that was a lot of money to expend. So I think they started the capital reserve for that reason. Now, pretty soon we won't have servers, they'll be in the cloud and that'll be one less expense. But I think that's originally, it was seen as a big expensive item.
And it's a good example. And I think that's one that we hope the selectmen take up, the computer maintenance and also just all the computer services, things like that, just for the amount of money. But that's a good example. Any other just general thoughts about capital reserves or any funds that you want to know more information on? Yeah, go ahead.
So Bob, I'm gonna pick on you again for 3 of them, really. I'll just do one at a time and then somebody else can ask a question, but I'll start with highway equipment. We started at 876,000. We keep putting money in and we keep spending money, but we're ending at $1 million now. $1,039,000. So I just wonder, is that too much or is that a good amount with inflation? Should that be looked at or just a question?
No.
So I'm not sure on, let's see. I do know the trucks are about to replace them. We're doing one each year. I think I've got 3 to do. We have a backhoe that's coming up that's due. We have a roadside mower that's due. I'm trying to be conservative on replacing as much as possible. I know we've pushed back things quite a bit with trucks. I'm trying to get caught back up with that, so the maintenance line comes back down, hopefully. The grader, one of the big ticket items is a grader. I haven't made any calls to see exactly what the price of those are right now. I'm holding on to what we got. The grader, I know I've talked to John about this before. It's actually in pretty good shape. I feel that as long as we can keep it running, it's not worth replacing, but I'm sure that machine alone is probably 300,000-400,000 plus. So all these items add up. We have pushed quite a bit back and on the smaller stuff there that, like the roadside mower, something like that.
Is it fair to say that we should be looking at this list relative to the CIP? Would the CIP outline some of those equipment purchases you're talking about? It would. So I think that for our understanding what amounts of monies we need to support going forward and whether or not it's reasonable to even have it on the reserve list, we need to understand the CIP. So that should be a parallel piece of paper in front of us. Maybe at the next meeting or the subcommittee can have that available so we can at least have some visibility into what those numbers are.
Yeah, I think this subcommittee should discuss what they're gonna need and then request that from Kim and the town on the documents you think you'll need to have those discussions. I'm going to assume, Bob, that the money you have right now in reserves is based on the schedule for equipment similar to Chief Lyons on fire equipment,
That'd be
right?
correct.
Yeah. So I think, Melissa, it's a great question. I think, and I know in past years, you've all presented, you know, this year we're planning to purchase this year, next year we're planning to purchase this. And from what I recall, all the reserve funds were set up for that.
And most of the stuff was done prior to me coming into this position. I've changed a few things as I go, but most of it was pretty well set already there.
Okay. Question 2 for Bob, Melissa. You said you had 3.
It's probably the same scenario because the sewer department, we're up to 139,000. We started at 63. We're putting money in and not seeing a whole lot of payments. So I guess what are you saving for?
If we have a pump failure, I'm trying to think the last time we bought one of those, when I first took over, I think we ended up buying 2.
Well, we bought the bypass. pump,
Or
and that was-
rebuilding them.
Yeah, we bought a bypass pump and that was about 100,000.
Yeah, yeah. And
So
generally, I think Richard purchased a couple pumps, the former road agent, and I want to say those back then were about 300,000, but generally it cost almost 100,000 just to rebuild one. So it's not cheap. Generators, we're looking at purchasing them, but we're doing the bond on that. You know, that there's 300,000 for 3 generators. So everything we have down is big ticket items.
And my last one was the sidewalks.
Okay, we took some money out. We're waiting on the water department on when they're going to start their project. They actually have a meeting coming up I'm going to attend.
I remember that.
And some of it, you know, we want to eventually fix all the sidewalk on Main Street.
I thought I recall in the previous year that we chatted about hiring an engineer to look at the sidewalks. Did we do that? And so do we know what Main Street sidewalks are going to cost us?
I don't recall hiring or discussing hiring an engineer.
Yeah, we did. I thought we allocated money for,
Are you talking about the corridor study? Oh, okay. The planning board's corridor
might
study,
have been the planning board's
Yeah,
corridor, which
okay.
was going to address how to deal with the sidewalks. and
part of it,
additional
and
other
access
things.
points and things like that. Yes, they have
But-
not spent that money yet.
So we don't know what that's going to cost us.
I believe we budgeted 25,000. Is that right?
No, I'm
15?
sorry. We don't know what Main
Oh, for
Street
the sidewalk
sidewalks will cost.
No, we
us.
don't. No.
Definitely not 25,000.
Okay.
Tim, just as a follow-up, do we know when that study is going to be done?
I believe the planning board put it off because they wanted to do it in conjunction with the water department's replacement of water mains. They felt it would be, having that information as to how the water department was going to do that those changes would be helpful.
We'll have the water meeting that's coming up. Is that correct? And then from that meeting, that will inform
The planning
the core.
board, yeah, the planning board is going to be doing that in conjunction with that. And I think the water department, I thought it would be started sooner than this, but I believe it's supposed to be started next summer. But that's sort of got some other issues they're working with as well, so.
Chris,
Yes.
where do we stand with the CIP committee now? When I first came on board here, the CIP committee was made up of 3 planning board people and 2 budget committee
Yeah.
people.
Charlie has graciously volunteered to be on the CIP committee.
Yeah,
Yep. So I'm going to talk to Adam about adding him into that.
okay. That's good because
In the
The-
past, Lindsay has been the budget committee representative for
Uh-huh.
CIP.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think when we got away from that format, we got away from the budgetary aspects of a CIP program.
Mm.
And I think it's important that we restore sort of,
Yeah. I think Lindsay's been representative for the last 2 to 3 years, and now Charlie this year. So it's been a while since I don't recall the last time we didn't have a budget committee member on the CIP.
yeah, okay.
But good question. And we thank Charlie for his volunteerism. Signing up for everything, Charlie. Got to be careful. Any other burning questions for capital reserves? Or things you want to learn more about? Melissa.
The DPW building and the GIS update. What is that?
The GIS update, should be,
That's non-funded anymore.
yeah, we did that. I want to say we finished that. That's that's associated with our tax maps and assessment cards. I think we completed that project
3 or
4 or 5 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
Had to be 4 or 5 years by now. So that one should be discontinued. I think the selectmen will put it on the warrant to discontinue it. In other words, get a vote, because I don't think we'll be doing another project like that in probably any time in the near future. Unlike master plan, where that is something that gets done cyclically. But the GIS, it was a long project, but it's completed.
Yeah. Does that answer your question, Melissa?
Also, because I asked 2 in 1.
Yeah, go ahead.
DPW building, what's DPW? Department.
Department of
The Public Works.
Oh, okay.
So where
How
they
come
store
he doesn't
this.
have any money there?
I want to say that's probably a holdover for when they did the new building. Yeah, so they saved up money probably over several years and then built the new DPW building. When I say new, 15, 20 years ago, I don't know how long.
2004.
Okay, so almost 20 years ago. So
So we're just holding it open for the next.
it could now, so the choice will be the selectmen could either discontinue that, or if we think that at some point in the future, we want to save money to do other DPW buildings, you could just put money into it. You wouldn't have to go to town meeting to ask, can we create the fund and also put money into it? So, the GIS, I would say we're not going to do any GIS, and that would be a good one to discontinue. DPW building, it may be that there is a need in the future to consider saving money for another one or not.
So this is another area where clarity of language is important. I mean, if you look at the spreadsheet, it says Public Works Buildings. I don't know what that means. So I advocate that we really need to create a facilities maintenance budget. I think Phil Sherman has worked a little bit with Bob on, how we characterize what facilities need what maintenance. I think Phil has actually done some work that indicates, on average, if you have X amount of assets in buildings, you want to have X% of that asset base put aside for facility maintenance. We should be thinking about that because we are forever chasing the maintenance dollar in our buildings. And so we should take a look at this thing and look at all the building stuff, dump it into one area and understand what that number should be. And let's get our arms around maintenance on a regular schedule. And I would put this into one of those categories. If we need a new building for something, in my view, that should go to the town. It should be bonded. It should play it all out that way. So I wouldn't put it in there. But anyway, that's my point of view.
So along with the DPW building that was constructed in 2004, there's also a fire station expansion fund that was established in 2000. We fully used the funds in 2004, as well as bonded both the fire department as well as the newest DPW building. Certainly, there was a renovation done after the newest building was constructed. Last year, I was going to make the recommendation because the fire department does have a fund that is not listed on the sheet, but there's no money in it. It was never dissolved by a vote at town meeting. So I gather that it's still available. I was going to make that recommendation last year, but because of the cuts that were made to the capital reserve, I didn't feel it was prudent. This year, when we met with the subcommittee for the fire department, and I've been in discussions, building and facilities committee, I believe that was 2019, and have been talking with our board of fire wards. The New London Fire Department at some point will need an expansion, and we were hoping to do that before the next ladders ordered in fiscal year 2032. The reason for that is our current aerial that was ordered in 2012, if you go by and you look at the ladder, there's a cutoff for the aerial to actually sit within the cab of the vehicle, which is great because it fits in our station, maximum height of 10 foot, 8 inches, excuse me. However, we also lost 40% of our water that was on that first due piece of apparatus to respond to building fires because we had to reduce the height. Part of the issue is the new federal emission standards. There's going to be another standard coming up in 2027. So that is something that I would like to see. But what it does do is if we were able to put $15,000, $20,000 or whatever the case is into a fund, it would give us the ability to have that conversation and plan ahead. So in 2023 or probably before that time when the vehicle's ordered, the voters would know. And certainly if you're putting $15,000 or $20,000 into a reserve account, it's not going to pay for the building. But what it could do is pay for the architectural drawings as opposed to a J-line rendition on some paper, or engineered drawings, and then you could bond it for the building itself. So I do think from a transparency standpoint, I do like your idea of combining stuff from a simplistic standpoint, but I also think there is a benefit to having an account where the questions asked, like Melissa did, what for? What is this? What is this for? And it gives the budget committee an opportunity to have that discussion. It gives the voters an opportunity on an annual basis to say, yes, we're agreeing with the Board of Fire Wards, the Select Board, and the Budget Committee to put these funds in. So it's not a surprise at some point when we do need a building because of the height restrictions, because of the expansion. So.
Listen, I don't disagree with you. I think this is where words matter, right?
Yes.
And what words we use matter. So, having a bucket for facilities maintenance, and be clear as to what that means would be different from a bucket for capital improvements to a facility.
Yep.
Expansion of a facility, right? So, yeah, that wouldn't, I don't know if 200,000 would pay for that. I don't know what it's required, but, I think those are two distinct buckets, and if we could educate people about those distinctions and free up and understand what our maintenance costs are, because we're just falling behind. We just finished the Whipple Hall inside, and there's a laundry list of stuff on the outside. And, the library needs work. I know that's a different budget, but it just keeps on adding up. You walk through the transfer station, every building needs work, and it's going to translate into hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we should figure that out.
I would totally concur. The other thing too, just from a budget standpoint, one of the concerning things, and certainly the last few years has been, I think we can all agree has been abnormal. But the vehicle manufacturer that we ordered our replacement for our engine 2, which is our rescue engine, last year had 4 incremental increases of 7%. So, and I'm just rounding up $1 million, 7%, $280,000, which is nuts. So in an effort to be fiscally responsible, conservative, whatever you want to call it, we are taking a look at the next piece of apparatus to be replaced and potentially re-chassied. So instead of spending $450,000 or $500,000, whatever that piece of equipment would be at the time of replacement in a couple of years, it might be 250,000. So we might be able to save the town a substantial amount by just taking the plastic body and tank off of our current piece and putting it on a new cabin chassis. So I think that when the departments are looking at various things, we're trying to, I mean, the chief had mentioned some grants and offsetting budget stuff. We're trying various things to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible and maybe looking outside of how we have normally done things year after year.
Great. Any other questions, thoughts? Oh, wait, sorry.
Thanks, Chris. In 2019, these numbers were based on 2019 costs. I don't know the answer. Maybe Kim or Lynn does. I mean, the amounts we have there, they're
The 2019 end of year, that's the amount that was in there.
right. But those were based on projections from 2018, 2017, whatever.
Yeah.
And so now my question, in 2024, with the amounts that are there, is there or do we get cost estimates of what it would cost, for example, for a new truck, et cetera, so that we could decide whether we need to add to that reserve fund or keep, Jay mentioned this expansion column that is got nothing in it, leaving that as it is, but funding it now for a if you will, a new chassis or whatever is needed, rather than close the account. So I don't know, Lynn, is it possible to?
Well, so I might be able to answer your question. I do know that the department heads, when they've come and present in years past, have talked about looking forward and what a truck might cost right now and trying to think about what another truck may cost in 6 years, right?
Right.
Because you're telling me like you're thinking about things in 2032, which are 9 years away. Obviously, things change, but maybe looking at an average rate of inflation, those sorts of things to determine costs.
Right.
Yeah. So I'd say all department heads look at that and try and be as accurate as possible with the information they have.
Projecting it
Ahead
out with some
Yep.
assumptions of.
But
interest.
like last year when we cut everything by half, right? Now you have to, if you want to meet those funds, you have to try and catch up in a
Right.
certain way, right?
Right.
So does the selectmen or budget committee, are they open to doubling the previous year to catch back up? So. Well, that's what
Over time.
we're doing for things like equipment. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm just saying to try and catch up. Yeah.
Well, that is being
That
done.
Jay can speak to his experience. but-
Yeah, and a good example is our air packs. They're got a 15-year longevity for the life of the pack. After 15 years, they are no longer serviceable. You can't have anyone work on them, flow test them, whatever the case may be. So last year when things were cut and then looking at the increases, we're talking anywhere from 250 now to $325,000, depending on what what type of air pack you choose to replace it with. So that's one of those things where with Lynn, we looked at what the current guesstimate was and looking at expanding it to $40,000, I think we were looking at for the next 2 or 3 years in order to meet that cost. But so to John's question, yes, I think that all the department heads look at things. Certainly it's a guesstimate initially. I mean, apparatus used to be 3 to 7%. So we'd guess, 5% increases. That's certainly not the case today. But if there is a cut in the reserve account, you either have to play catch up, or hopefully it's a longer period of time, like John had indicated, where you're doing it more slowly or maybe at a increased increment. But those are all considerations that we look at.
Does that answer your question, John?
Yeah. I wanted to ask about was the computer maintenance. You had mentioned, I think maybe we don't need that any longer because of the upgrades. So my question is, can you transfer money from computer maintenance into another maintenance account, or does that have to be closed and voted on, or what's the process of that?
The town meeting is allowed to change the funds from one to another by vote of town meeting. They can discontinue it completely, put the money into the general fund. So it will really depend on what the selectmen decide to put on the warrant to ask the voters.
But it has to be voted on if you want to
If you want
close
to
one of
close it,
these.
right, close it or change the purpose must be voted on.
Okay.
Melissa?
What is Muni Regional Transport?
That's a fun one. That is every time you register a car in New London, you pay a $5 fee that goes into that account. And then it can be used for, that's the most expansive description that you get. Improvements to transportation system, roads, bridges, bikes, pedestrians. So it can be used for any of those items. And we actually, I noticed on here that I didn't change that no to a yes. This past town meeting, we had a vote and we changed it for agents to expend so that we can use it. And we are going to use some of it this year. Were we paving or graveling, Bob? But we're pulling out some of it to use this year. But that fund continues to every quarter I send the money in for what has been collected.
It is not.
I have a general question. The miscellaneous income column, what does that represent?
Dividends and interest that Joe has, or our trustees have earned on it.
Okay. So when you look at that total amount, of $8,000, $8,365 in fiscal year 2022, as a percentage of the total fund balance, it's well under 1%. So I remember Joe mentioning that they trustees of the funds have to keep liquid a certain amount. And they do, and they're limited in the vehicles they use to invest the monies, like bond treasuries and that sort of thing. It seems like a very low percentage of income on a fairly high balance of cash. And maybe you could help. Is that something we have an opportunity in?
I would take that up with the trustees of trust funds. They have meetings. And in fact, I think they're meeting on Friday morning, 8:45. Because it's their discretion as to where and how they invest monies according to state law. State law does put stipulations on them to make sure they don't get overly aggressive and lose taxpayer money. So they don't invest in risky vehicles.
And those percentages I remember have changed. Someone I know in town, and I think there was a year where, and I, off the top of my head, I think it was like above 2%.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that depending on the investments.
Yeah,
those-
and this is 2022 interest rates were minimal, so, yeah, thank you.
So what's happening with the general cemetery maintenance? Do we have a big project coming up there?
Yeah, is that the trust funds? Yeah, we have over 800 of them, I think, cemetery perpetual care funds, which can only be used for particular plots. And I've been talking to Joe recently about it. And I think he'll talk to the cemetery trustees about doing work, like cleaning headstones, those kinds of things. So that money can only be used for those things. But I think we do have another capital reserve fund for projects that we could hold. I know the cemetery trustees want to do some potential expansion where they would actually lay out more plots, buy more land, potentially. So which one, is this one the perpetual care funds or the town fund?
There's a general cemetery maintenance fund,
Right.
which is
86, well, no, what's the
not an
total?
agent. It's not an agent to expend on that one.
Because it's a,
Yeah,
because it's a group of all different.
right. I don't think that was, I think this is the town funds. These are only town funds here, right, Lynn?
That's correct.
Yeah, so these funds could be used for cemetery projects like expansion, like, I think they want to, what do you call those things that you put the, ashes in? Starts with a
Urns?
C. Right, no, but the structure that they're put in is called columbarium, I think.
Something like that.
What is it? Not a mausoleum, a columbarium, I think. But anyway, that's one of the things that the cemetery trustees are thinking. So those funds would be brought to town meeting, requested by the cemetery trustees if they were going to put a cemetery vault, but I think it's called, is that right? Columbarium? Does that sound right?
Sounds good to me.
How is the old Main Street Cemetery fence being funded?
How is it being funded?
It's being funded. What's that?
The perpetual care one, right? That's the one we can take money for those lots, That's not this.
The painting of the fence will come out of the operating budget.
That didn't fall in, well, that's, again, this goes back to.
They didn't want to wait, the selectmen didn't want to wait to go to town meeting to
Yeah.
ask
To
for the
get
funds. They
approval.
felt that
could-
the
if we
fence
could-
was so bad.
If we were agents to expend, we could have.
Could have used that
expended
fund,
it.
hence my
Right.
point, okay.
Right, but the
I agree
selectmen
with-
felt, yeah, that it was important enough to get it done. And I think it's actually being
I'd rather
done.
Make a dead joke, but I can't.
Yeah. I haven't gone over there to look, yeah. Yeah.
I know. It's okay. I didn't make it.
What's that?
That's nothing. Any additional questions? Right. Any other business that we need to discuss? Right. So we have our John?
When would we see this expanded list that's more understandable, presented?
So it sounds like the subcommittee would, and I guess they can talk about who wants to be their lead, would have to meet and have as many meetings as they think they need to come back to make recommendations. That would then be involved in our budget discussions and then maybe potentially go to town meet. Some of that might go to town meeting this year. Don't know. So toward the end, I would say that there could be some resolution to some of these things at town meeting. I know that doesn't answer your question, but I don't think we have a time frame yet to say, here's where we're going to come back with all of our suggestions.
No, well, I wasn't asking about the suggestions. I just meant the expansion of what bridge maintenance means.
Oh.
Is there a drop down explanation of what that means more clearly? Because it seems
Yeah,
like.
you have that. That's the purpose, the sheet that says town created capital reserve funds.
Yes.
Those purposes that town meeting set are listed there. So that's what town meeting has set if you wanted to see how the selectmen interpreted something, you could certainly ask them how they would interpret something like in, say, improvements. So if town meeting said DPW improvements, that would be up to the selectmen to interpret that. And then the trustee or trust funds would say, potentially, we disagree with you. We don't think that that's an improvement.
Right. So you have to match up what's on the purpose with what's on the capital reserve fund spreadsheet.
Yeah, the spreadsheet gives amounts, gives financial amounts. If you want to just know what capital reserve we have and what its purpose is, then this nice, handy, neat, succinct list would at least tell you what town meeting said the purpose of the capital reserve is for.
Okay.
Looks like this one,
We have a question in the back.
that one.
Oh. That's the extent of our purpose definitions though, on there.
Yep, Lynn went through every capital reserve, looked at when it was established. That's what the voters said. That's
Yes.
what they were comfortable with. That's what they wanted.
Certainly aren't wordy, are they?
No, they're not. They're succinct
Okay.
too.
Yeah, okay.
So I may have a dumb question because I'm kind of new to meetings like this, but if I just want, like, I know we're going to dig up Main Street for the water main, which makes perfect sense. If I want to know how much that's going to cost, is that actually information that I have access to by going on the town website?
So,
That's
well,
the
I
water
guess after,
precinct.
after the work, and tell me if I'm wrong, but after that information was determined, the selectmen would discuss it in their meetings, and
Well-
those, you could either attend the meetings or read the meeting minutes to learn what those actual amounts could potentially be.
Well, the sidewalks, the selectmen would deal with. The water precinct is the one that will put the RFP out to do the water main replacement itself. How much is it going to cost to dig up the road, put the water mains? That's the water precinct.
Okay,
They
because
have
at that
meetings-
meeting I've heard when that comes up, they said, well, that's all set. I don't exactly know. what
Well,
that
and I know
means.
they just improved their website, so it could very well be. I haven't looked at it recently, but I know they did a lot of work on their website recently. They may have the RFP and
Okay.
the information on it. I'm not sure. I haven't looked recently, but they definitely would have it.
Okay,
If you call them up, they're happy to share whatever information they have on it. But with regard to the sidewalks, when we do it, that will be on our site. And we could put a link from our site to the water precinct if that would help.
thank you.
Do we have a motion to adjourn? So move, any seconds? Second. All right, all those in favor? Aye. All right. Thanks, everybody.
I saw him hand it first. Is that okay with you, Colin?
John
And Hannah?
John and Colin.
You want- Look, Hannah, she said it first.
Sure. Okay, she did. You saw it better than I did. Yeah.
Doesn't matter.